Want to welcome
Hispanic
viewers watching on
Patriots. Welcome
ABC
to the
and around the world tonight.
debate
Vice
between
President
Kamala
Harris
Harris
and
and
President Donald
Donald
Trump are just
Trump.
moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaign.
See about
with
these
Election
consequential
Day,
debates,
now
as
less than 2 months
newscaster
away.
lady
For Vice
says.
President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st.
It's also her first kind of public, unscripted appearance, too. So we'll see how that works.
Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate.
This debate has gone completely different dynamic ever since we kicked out the other guy.
The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals.
So here are the
1 minute
rules.
for follow-ups,
The Kamala
clarifications,
Harris
or
campaign has
responses.
basically agreed to the same
Microphones will
rules
only be
as
turned on when it's their
Biden
turn
had.
to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight.
So as
in
everybody
this hall
says,
at the
no,
National
I'm
Constitution
speaking
Center.
moment.
This is
That's
an
what
intimate
everyone's kind of
setting
making
for
the
two
joke of with
candidates
this.
who have never met.
And yeah, so
President
it's
Trump
interesting.
won the coin
They have
toss.
the
He
same
chose to deliver
rules,
the final
no
closing statement of the evening. Vice
audience,
President
no
Harris
nothing.
selected the
So
podium to the right.
I guess just
So let's
COVID
now
rules
welcome the
forever.
candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
Someone just yelled. You could literally, because there's no audience, you literally heard them say, "Go."
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate.
Have fun.
Thank you.
Interesting.
Welcome to you
Hi,
both.
my name
It's
is
wonderful
Kamala
to have you
Harris,
and
in
honored to
case
have
you
you both
didn't
here
know,
today.
Mr.
Good
Trump.
evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's
But
get
we're not
started.
going to get one.
I want to begin
So
tonight with the issue that voters
instead we're gonna
repeatedly
have a
say
debate with
is their
Kamala
number
Harris.
one issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person
going
on
on
the
international
stage who has a
trips and
plan
having
that is
an
about
Ivy League
lifting up
education.
the middle
It
class
was a
and
middle.
working people
It was
of
really
America.
working middle
I
class
believe
guys.
in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people, and that is why I imagine and
Because
have
I
actually
have
planned
to.
to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest.
I intend
tax
to, but
credit that
doing
we
it
have given
now?
in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat.
That
buy
won't get
clothes
me
for their
elected.
children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires.
I liked what he did before.
And
We
big
had low
corporations,
cost of everything.
which
It was
will result
great.
in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists
Trump's
have
like,
said
"I'm gonna remember that."
Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families.
Again, this
in
sales
about
tax she's talking about would
$4,000
replace the
more a
income
year
tax. So the
because
more you
of his
buy,
policies
and the
his
more expensive
ideas
you buy, the
about
more you
what
pay.
should
So it's
be
actually more
the
progressive than the
backs
income
of
tax.
middle-class people paying
But-
for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First
of
Trump
all, I have no
response.
sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world.
The American
And
people
the
paying? No.
tariff will be
Other
substantial in
countries
some
paying.
cases.
That
They
would
took
be
in
the good one.
billions
That
and
would be
billions
great.
of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people.
It's weird to me that she was
have ever
looking
seen
down
before.
there because
Probably
they don't have
the
any
worst in
written
our nation's
notes.
history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster
no, they
for people,
weren't.
for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States.
I guess you
look
can
at
make handwritten
Springfield,
notes
Ohio.
after the fact,
You look
but
at
bringing
Aurora
them
in
beforehand
Colorado.
was wrong.
They are taking over the
Colorado
towns. They're taking
mentioned.
over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that
Colorado
and Biden
mentioned for the
led
worst
into
reason.
our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us
in the middle of
worst
COVID.
unemployment since the Great Depression.
Because
Donald
it was
Trump
COVID.
left us the worst public health
But she can't say that,
epidemic
obviously,
in a
because then it would be
century.
truthful.
Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we
far as
have
attacks
done
on
is
democracy
clean up
goes since
Donald
the Civil
Trump's
War,
mess. What
pretty
we have
light
done and
attack
what
on
I intend to
democracy,
do
all things
is build
considered.
on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're
And
gonna
also
hear
what Trump has to
tonight
say.
is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly
Again.
that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there.
I love how no matter
haven't
who
read
Trump
it.
is
I don't
around,
wanna
they're
read
the
it
ones who
purposely.
know
I'm
better
not
than
going to read
anybody
it.
of a
This was a
thing.
group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas. I guess some good, some bad. But it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes.
Yeah,
very
again, it would be
substantially
kind of
and
nice
create
if the
a great
Democrats would
economy
create
like I
a
did
200-page
before.
document,
We had the
or
greatest
900
economy. We
whatever,
got hit with
that
a
said
pandemic.
exactly what
And
they
the
would
pandemic
come
was
out and do,
not
but they won't
since
do that.
1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back. And
Exactly.
it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you
Except
look
for the
at
one
his
you just
economic
heard,
plan,
obviously,
it's all
but
about
okay.
tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of
Our
America.
relative plans,
What Goldman
things
Sachs
that
has
resembled
said
our plans.
is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy.
Somehow.
What the
Somehow.
Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at
I have
where
to
we
say,
are and
Kamala
where we
is
stand
starting
on
out
issues.
a
And I
lot
invite you to know
better than I
that
thought she
Donald Trump
would. She's
actually
pretty much
has
just
no
offering
plan
the same
for
thing
you
she said at the
because he is
DNC.
more interested
It'll be
in
interesting to see
defending
when she
himself
runs out of
than
those
he is
talking
in
points
looking out
what
for
she
you.
says from there.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President
you
brought
both
up
think
your
the other
tariffs.
doesn't
You
have a
responded,
plan at
and let's
all.
drill down on this, because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs
One thing
the
about
typical
this
family
is
nearly
that
$4,000
what
a
we,
year.
like for
Do you
example,
believe
he wants to
Americans can afford
increase
higher
oil
prices
production.
because of tariffs?
They're
He
not
wants
gonna
to
have
lower
higher
the price of
prices. What's
oil.
gonna have- and
So
who's
that would
going to
mean
have
that
higher
we wouldn't have to
prices is
import as
China
much. So
and
I don't know how it
all
would
of the
affect gas
countries that have been
prices.
ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because
Kamala
I've
can't
never seen
answer
a
that
worse
point
period
for
of
what it's
time.
worth.
People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president
Use
said there,
the
because
best
the Biden
poll you ever
administration
hear
did
in
keep
debates.
a
That's a
number of the
good
Trump tariffs
rule of
in
thumb
place. So
for
how do you respond?
politicians.
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help
Not our
them
Doritos.
improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition.
I don't know where
for the
she's getting
21st
that
century,
from, because
which means
there's
focusing
intense
on
amount
the
of
details
investment
of what that
into
requires,
Malaysia
focusing on
and
relationships
Singapore
with
and
our
other places
allies,
for
focusing
computer
on
chips.
investing in
So
American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing.
vote Democrat,
Focusing
Silicon
on
Valley
what we
Trust
need
Fund
to do
babies
to
is what she's
support
saying
America's
here.
workforce, so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi!
I'm sure that
point,
wasn't sarcastic
when we
at
know
all.
that
Not at
Xi
all.
was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all,
It was
they
the
bought their
Democrats
chips
that were
from
saying that the
Taiwan.
origins
We
of
hardly make
COVID
chips
were
anymore
a
because
conspiracy
of,
theory.
philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4
She's
years
trying to
ago
talk
is out
kinda
the
like
window.
Biden did.
She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be
That's
the end of
true.
our
Trump
country.
calls out La
She's a
Chancla.
Marxist. Everybody knows
She
she's
calls
a
out the
Marxist.
flip-flopper.
Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions
Obama's
and
father
millions
was
of
also a
people that
Marxist
are pouring into our
professor,
country
but
monthly,
ignore that, I
where
guess.
it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a
Again,
lot
Kamala
higher than
Harris
21.
is Obama
That's
and
bigger
Hillary
than New
Clinton
York
in a
State,
trench coat.
pouring
That's
in.
who you're
And
voting
just
for,
look
people.
at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people
We're not
coming
voting
in are
for us,
criminals.
probably our
And that's
audiences,
bad
but if you
for
know
our
anybody
economy,
voting
too.
Democrat,
You mentioned before, we'll talk about
let them know
immigration
that.
later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president
Kill
in
laws,
American
not
history.
babies.
Then last month, you said
There's
that your
a slogan for
administration
you.
would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President
You can do
Harris says
both,
that women
for what
shouldn't
it's
trust
worth.
you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that.
That was
because
Virginia,
that
if I remember
predominates,
correctly.
because
But
they're
that guy
radical.
also
The
was a
Democrats
Democrat
are
who wore
radical in
blackface, so that
and
mistake
her
doesn't matter.
vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay.
Kamala's
And
being
that's not
very
okay with me.
emotionally
Hence the
reactive
vote.
through all
but
of
what
this,
I
and
did
not
is
in a good
something
way.
for 52 years they've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of
do.
Republicans do.
Yep, there he is.
Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have
Talking
thought.
about abortion
But
aside,
each
just a
individual
random aside,
state is
her hair is a lot
voting. It's the
frizzier
vote
than
of
I
the
kind of
people
thought it
now.
would
It's
be,
not tied
and
up in the
Donald
federal
Trump's is
government.
kind of a lot
I did
grayer
great
and a little
service
bit
in doing
more,
it. It took courage
I don't
to
know,
do it. And the Supreme Court had great
ruffled.
courage in doing it.
So
And I
never
give
feel that bad
tremendous
when you
credit
walk
to those
outside of the
6
house and you have like
justices.
slight
There is no
imperfections, people,
state
even
in this country where
politicians.
it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies.
There are
and that's not
situations in which
actually
that
a
will
surprising
happen. It's
fact.
not a matter of it being explicitly
Let's
legal. It's a
understand
matter
how we
of
got here.
it's not punishable if it
Donald Trump
happens.
hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention
As opposed to
that
all
they
the
would undo
Democrats who
protections
they
of Roe v.
feet
Wade.
selected them.
And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20
As opposed to our
states,
Democrats
there
who
are
we
Trump
elect to the Supreme
abortion
Court who
bans,
always do the right
which
thing
make it
regardless if it's Democrat or
criminal
not.
For
It's so
a doctor
hypocritical,
or
you know?
nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means.
Again,
A
Trump
survivor
just
of a
said
crime, a
that he
violation
doesn't want that to
their
be the
body
case, so
does not have the
interesting.
right to make a
Interesting
decision about
choice.
what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her
There's
body. I
absolutely
have
religious
talked with
belief
women
that says that.
around
It's like,
our
no, we
country.
don't allow
You
our
wanna talk
society to
about
kill
this is what
babies. It's
people
bad.
wanted?
Shouldn't do it.
Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't
Donald
want
Trump's
that.
just sitting there like,
She
I
didn't want
literally
that.
don't want any of
As
that.
long as 13-year-old
Crazy cat
survivor
lady,
against
what are
us
you screaming
who's
at me
forced to
for
carry a
about this?
pregnancy to term? They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when
They don't want
Congress
that baby
passes
in
a
them.
bill to put
Why should
back
they
in
have that
place the
baby in them?
protections
I
of
don't
Roe v.
understand
Wade.
ever
As
how this is
President of the
a
United States, I will
appealing,
proudly
convincing
sign
argument.
it
I'm really glad to,
into
that's
law.
one reason I'm glad to be a
But
Republican, because I
understand,
never have to
if
defend
Donald
killing
Trump were to be
babies. That's just a
reelected,
difficult
he will
position
sign
to
a
do, to
national
be
abortion
honest.
ban. Understand, in his project
Again,
2025,
I don't
there
understand
would be a
also how
national
the Democrats
abortion-
could make
a
this
monitor
argument that
would be
that
monitoring
Trump
your
wants to
pregnancies, your
have an abortion
miscarriages.
ban
I
when
think the
it's not up to
American
the federal
people
government
believe
anymore.
that certain freedoms,
And if all the
in
states in the
particular
union
the
want
freedom
it,
to
then
make
why
decisions
should the
about
president
one's
deny
own
that at
body
that point?
should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Democrats
There she
pretend to
goes
be
again.
libertarian,
It's a
but only
lie.
on abortion.
I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've
There it
gotten
is.
what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be
Repealing Roe
brought
v.
back
Wade
into the
was more
states, and the
popular than
states are
people
voting.
realize.
And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart. And they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it
Well,
came
I
to your
won't
desk?
have to because, again,
Yeah,
two
it's
things.
not even
Number
relevant.
one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50, and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So
That's
it's
a good
just
point
talk.
that Trump
You know
makes.
what it
It's like,
reminds
yeah,
me of when
she
they
might
said they're
have
gonna
a bunch
get
of
student
lofty
loans,
goals, but she'll never be
terminated,
able to make
and
them
it ended
happen
up being a
because
total
the Democrats don't have
catastrophe.
the
Student
momentum
loans,
the
and then
Republicans have in the
her-
House for
I
Senate,
think probably
for the
her
House and the
boss,
Senate.
If you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea. And how unfair that would have been, part of the reason they lost, to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if
Basically,
I
it's
could
like
just
they're
get a
not going to
yes or
give
no,
it to you
because your running
people.
mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D. And
Shut up,
I
J.D.
don't mind
is
if
kind
he
of the
has
point.
a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me. But I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd
You
never
can
be
go
able
back
get it,
to
just like
our
she couldn't get
RNC
student loans, they
videos,
couldn't get student loans. They
especially
didn't
with
even come
Trump
close to
being
getting student loans.
on
They
in the
taunted
VIP area.
young people
And I
and a
remember
lot
this
of other
hilarious
people that
moment
had
where
loans.
J.D. Vance was
They can never
clapping,
get this
but they were
approved. So it
but
doesn't
everyone was
matter what
clapping
she
for
says
J.D.
about going
Vance
to
and
Congress.
Trump. So
They're
Trump
wonderful.
actually,
Let's
I
go
have
to
this on
Congress,
video,
do it.
grabs
But the fact
J.D.'s
is
hands
that
as a
for
kind
years
of,
they wanted
yeah,
to
you
get
can
it
stop
out of
clapping.
Congress and
It's
out
for
of the
you.
federal
Don't
government.
clap for
And
yourself.
we did something that everybody said
So
couldn't be done. And now
occasionally
you have a
Trump has
vote
to
of
do
the
that
people
kind of
on
hand-holding,
abortion.
you know.
Vice President Harris,
Very
I'm gonna give
common
you
for a
time to
mentor
respond, but I do
relationship.
want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and in asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting
It
to
does
the women of
happen. Your
America.
governor
And
talked about
understand
it.
what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and
Amazing
dream
that
of having
every
a family
Republican
are
abortion
being
restriction
denied
in the country is
IVF
now a
treatments.
Donald Trump abortion
What is
ban.
happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state.
Think about the evil
to
of
get on
what
a
she's
plane
saying.
sitting
How
next to
how
strangers,
dare you
to
stop
go and
women
get the
from
healthcare
having to
she
kill their
needs.
babies because we don't
Barely
pay
can
them
afford
enough
to do
and
it,
because
and
they
what
need
you
2
are
jobs
putting
and
her
because they have
through
no husbands.
is unconscionable. And the people
That's
of
what's
America
unconscionable,
have not-
honestly,
the
is
majority
that
of
they would
Americans
rather fight
believe
for
in a
your
woman's
right
to make
to not
decisions about her own
exist
body, and
than
that is why
fight for your
in
right to
every
have
state
basic
where this
necessities
issue
in
has
life.
been on the ballot in red and blue states both.
No
the
wonder
people of
socialists are
America
fleeing from the
voted for
Democrat
freedom.
Party in
Vice
droves.
President Harris,
Excuse me, I
thank
have
you.
to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is
It's
fertilization.
true. He
IVF,
was talking
I
about
have
it with
been a
Tulsi
leader.
Gabbard.
In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, they You should ask.
I literally heard Kamala
Will she
say,
allow
"You have
abortion
not."
in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you
That's
answer
the
the
problem.
question? Would you
because
veto?
under Roe v. Wade,
Answer the question,
you
would you
could,
veto?
you could
Oh,
do
interesting,
abortions in the
interesting.
7th
Trump's
month, the
starting
8th
to
month,
prod a
the
little
9th
bit.
month,
Not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the former governor of Virginia. The governor
He corrected
of
that
Virginia
bit.
said
Nice.
we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the
It's
baby.
true.
Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border
I think
security.
Kamala
We know
wanted
it's
a
an issue that's
response to
important
that, and not
Republicans,
getting it was
Democrats,
not-
voters
is not gonna
across
make
the
her feel
board,
good.
in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal
And
border
he
crossings
failed.
reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past
I'm glad
June,
they've actually brought up
President
that
Biden
fact.
imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why
just in
did the
time for the
administration
election?
wait until
Who would've
6
known?
months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this
Interesting how the
stage
moderator
who has
actually asked that
prosecuted
question.
transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs.
Great.
and
Why didn't
human
you do
beings.
anything as vice president
And
then?
let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border.
and
to
$20
help
billion
those folks who
or
are
$1 million
working there right
to
now
Ukraine for no
overtime
reason.
trying to do their
Which again,
job.
I support
It would
Ukraine
have
100%.
allowed us
Trump
to
has a
stem
great
the
plan
flow of
to
fentanyl
help
coming
Ukraine.
into the United
And
States.
Biden and
I know
Harris
there
don't
are
want to
so
do
many
anything.
families watching
However, you
tonight
don't put that
who've
in
been
the border
personally
bill.
affected by the
They
surge
knew
of
that
fentanyl
several
in our
Republicans
country.
weren't going to vote
That
for it just
bill
on the
would have
porkishness
put
of that
more
alone.
resources to
So
allow
enough
us
with this
to
bipartisan
prosecute
border bill thing. It's
transnational
neither
criminal
bipartisan
organizations
nor a border
for
bill.
trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, "Kill the bill."
Donald
And you know
Trump was so
why?
powerful,
Because
despite the fact he wasn't
preferred to
president,
run on
that
a
he could do
problem
that. I can't
instead
even
of
do
fix
nothing as vice
a
president.
problem.
What a great
And
presentation.
This comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something.
That's
He's gonna
literally
talk
all
about
the
immigration a
Democrats
lot
ever
tonight,
do.
even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills
How
cause
dare he
cancer.
talk about Hannibal
And what
Lecter?
you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about
You
is
literally see that
you
quite a
will
lot
not hear
in
him
Kamala
talk about your
Harris's.
needs, your dreams, and your desires.
A lot of projection here,
and I'll tell you,
honestly.
I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so, that would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border?
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of
I
politics.
feel like this is a
That's
little
because
bit of a
people
trap
wanna
by
take
Kamala
their
because
country
she
back.
knew Trump would
Our
talk about
country
this,
is
but
being
I think
lost. We're a
answering the
failing
question would have
nation.
been better
and
here.
It happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora.
I think this
or
is a good
Springfield.
icebreaker
A lot of
situation,
towns
a
don't wanna
matter
talk
of like,
about
well,
it
who
because they're
cares
so
about whether I
embarrassed by
killed a
it.
bill or not?
In
Why didn't they do
Springfield,
anything?
They're eating the
Well,
dogs.
Donald
the
Trump
people
stopped
that
it
came
by
in.
stopping-
They're eating
yeah.
the cats. They're eating.
Yeah, these point
they're
about
eating
Haitian
the
immigrants
pets
eating cats
of
and
the people
dogs.
that live
It was
there.
on video,
And
so I
this
don't
is
know what
what's
anyone wants to
happening in
complain
our
about.
country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase. Make America great again.
Trump kind of like
She's
reversing
destroying
this
this
question.
country.
Like it kind
And
of
if
was
she
Kamala's
becomes
trap, and
president,
now
this
she's
country
kind of
doesn't
getting a
have
little
a
offended
chance
by
of
how well he's
success.
doing about
Not
it.
only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant
nobody
community.
reported it at all. They
People
just
on
videoed
television.
Let me
it.
just say here, this is
The people on
this is a
television say
clar-
my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good
Yeah.
thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
But the
television.
people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying their
manager.
dog
I'm
was
not taking
eaten
it from
by
a video of
the
people
that
saying
went
it right
there.
directly. I'm taking
Again,
it from the
Springfield
guy
City Manager
denying
says
it.
There's no evidence of that. Vice
We'll
President
find
Harris,
out.
I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. You know,
Kind of an odd
this
response,
is, I think, one of the
honestly.
reasons
That was a little
why in
oddball.
this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formally worked with President
The worst
Bush, Mitt
Republicans
Romney,
ever. Like, think
and
about
John
it. It's
McCain,
like, oh, I have the
including
traitors
the
vote. Vote
endorsement
for
of
me.
former Vice
Join
President
treason
Dick
co-
Cheney
you know,
and
treason
Congressmember
coalition.
Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know
Donald Trump
track
even
on
laughs
who
at Liz
the
Cheney
former
being
president
mentioned.
is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His
Everybody
former
that he
national
fired
security
talks
advisor
bad
has said
about
he
him.
is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric,
People in the military
when
know
the
there's no
issues that affect
hyperbole
the
like
American
hyperbole
people
from
are not
generals.
being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond
Yeah.
here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously.
cut to
They
the
did
chase.
bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan.
They didn't
and the
even fire
Taliban and
anyone
the
that had to
13
do with
people
Donald Trump's assassination
who's
attempt.
were just killed,
he
viciously
would
and
mention.
violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations
true.
anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was
He's
no
literally
good. I
famous
fired him.
for
So
it.
he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history.
And yet there's like
by
600 staffers and other such
fact,
Democrat
I
personnel
got
who
more
say they
votes
can't
than
stand
any
the
president,
Biden-Harris
sitting
situation at
president
all.
in
So
history by
200
far.
traitors versus 600 like
Let me
actual
continue on
operatives.
immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S.
With local
military.
police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know
Like
you
this.
believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah. It is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes. But it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in. And all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime, and it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris,
FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs.
Nice that Trump was kind of able to get in there, make sure that wasn't uncontested statement.
Well, I think this is so rich coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentence.
She's kind of having her own
And
like
let's
little
be clear
blueprint
where
and
each person stands
bullet
on the
points
issue
that
of
she
what
did
is
before the
important
debate
about
to kind of prep
respect
that
for
she
the
was
rule of
doing.
law and respect for law enforcement. The former
Will
Vice
she run out of
President
ammo
called for
before the end of the
defunding
debate? That's the question.
Federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs.
Let's
of
turn the
American
page on the
people,
tired
address
old
what
Trump
we need
rhetoric
to
so that
do
we can bring in
about
my
the
tired
housing
old
shortage,
Biden
which I
rhetoric
have
and
a
my
plan
tired
for.
old Hillary
Address
rhetoric
what we
and my
must do to
tired old
support our
Obama
small
rhetoric.
businesses.
Why
Address
have
bringing
one
down the
tired
price
old
of
rhetoric when you
groceries.
could have three tired old rhetorics in a
Frankly, the
trench
American
coat?
people are
Tired old
exhausted
rhetorics.
with
There's
the
a
same old tired
tongue
playbook.
twister for you.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Same tired old thing.
Every one
Says
of those cases
60-year-old woman.
was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any
Donald Trump makes a very good
if he were
case.
to
It's
enter
almost
the
like a
White House
defense and
again.
prosecution case. It really is.
This is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize.
I
the
don't think
Department
Donald
of
Trump
Justice
ever
against
advocated
his
for the
political
termination of the
enemies.
Constitution,
Someone who
which
has
is not even
openly
possible.
expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the
She
court
is
won't
just
stop
kind
him.
of
We
right
know
now
J.D. Vance
repeating
is
what
not
she
gonna
said
stop him.
on the
It's
at
up
the
to the American
DNC.
people.
Vice
to
President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president,
This is the one that weaponized, not me.
Interesting that
She
they turned on
weaponized.
his mic.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
Ah,
they talk about
very
democracy. I'm a
nice.
threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy.
Glad that
With
he
the
brought
fake
up the
Russia,
assassination. I think he
Russia
should keep
investigation
hammering on
that
that.
went nowhere.
I think he even made a
Lindsay.
little bit of a thing, like
Vice
because
President Harris, in your last
of
run
them,
for president,
one way
you
or
said
another.
you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't.
La
You
chancla.
supported decriminalizing border crossings.
The
Now you're
moderators
taking a
call
harder
out La
line. I know
chancla.
you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
Because I'm
So
trying to get
My
elected.
values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the, at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will
I need
not
to get
ban
elected
fracking.
here really
I have
badly,
not banned
so-
fracking as Vice President of the United States, and in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have
I
got
don't just
to
flip-flop
invest
in words. I flip-flop in
diverse sources of
actions.
energy,
Vote
so we
for me.
reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you,
Which is
I
why
grew
we've
up
done
a
it
middle-class kid,
only
raised by
but
a hardworking mother
since we
who
came into office.
worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase.
Don't you love
3
when
million
politicians
homes, increase
pretend
by
not
3
to be
million homes by
rich?
the end of my first term.
That's way more
My work
insulting than Donald
that is
Trump being
related to
openly, hey, I'm
having
rich,
a
but I
friend when
understand
was
your
in high school who was
values.
sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus
I don't know
then
why she's
on
bringing up this
protecting women
DNC
and children
stuff
from
again.
violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name-calling. The true measure of the leader
Like weird.
is the leader
Or
who
enslaving
actually
young
understands
African American
that
and
strength
Hispanic
is not
men
in
to be
beating
slave
people
labor
down,
for the
it's
state
in
of
lifting people
California.
up. I intend to be that president.
President
I'm
Trump.
sure
your
Well, first of
response?
all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years.
Make that
Defund
point
the
and move
police,
on.
she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out.
He
wait a
needs to
minute,
go
I'm
harder
talking
here,
now,
honestly.
if you don't mind, please.
Ah,
that sound
there
familiar?
it is.
She went out.
Don't lie. Don't lie.
went
She
out
said, man, she
to
was
Minnesota
unhappy. Oh,
and
man,
wanted
that
to
was
let
great.
criminals that
Donald
killed
Trump
people,
said that
that
I'm
burned down
speaking at her
Minneapolis.
before she did
She
to
went out and
him.
raised money to get him out of
With
jail.
the muted mics,
She
that
did
was
things
great.
that nobody would ever think of.
That's
now
gonna
she
be a
wants to
clippable
do
moment.
transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a
Yeah,
radical
isn't that a
left
great
liberal
isn't that a
would do
great
this. She
deterrent?
wants to
Don't
confiscate
come
your
here
guns, and she would
illegally.
never
You
allow
might
fracking in
accidentally get a
Pennsylvania.
sex
If
change.
she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they
Up
were.
the roof. I like that.
I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead, we'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of it. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400,
President
500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have
It
a
is
lot of
true. I
issues.
mean, there's no
Let's
reason
get
to say
back
that's
to
not
we're
true
out of
about
time.
it.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to
God
talk
help
about the
us.
peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack.
The things that we
Things in the
saw in
West Wing
Sri
say you
Lanka
watched
and
them unfold
Venezuela
on
that you all
television
called
off
brave
the
and
Oval
everything on
Office.
the media, but
You did
when
send out
Americans
tweets,
do
but
it, it's
was more than 2
terrible.
hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that.
Yeah, it's like technically nobody died besides Ashley Babbitt on January 6th itself. I mean, but people die at the border every day. You know how many Hispanic people cross the border, die of dehydration, starvation, murder? We don't know because they're all dropped in the desert and a lot of them are missing and we don't know where they are. So she's responsible for that. Trump was responsible for stopping it. So if you want to save Hispanic lives, vote for Trump. That's just
But let me
facts in U.S. politics right now.
When are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted?
There you go.
Or in Seattle. They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
That.
But let me just ask you.
You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
No, not really.
Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C.
So he's basically
and
saying
the mayor
no,
put it
but he's
back
taking
in
the
writing, as you
opportunity
know.
to not just say no.
I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi. But I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the president of the United States...
The peasants arrived and all of us just couldn't even.
...to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died.
Not wounded, Peanut, because injured is when you fall out of a tree.
The former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate.
Is that really what we want? I love that that's always the description of Charlottesville, when they had their tiki torches from Walmart. It's like trying to imitate European torch marches, because they look really cool in Europe. They looked really cringe at Charlottesville.
The president said, the former president
said, does it ever sound that dangerous when that's how people bring it up? Oh, that thing where all of the tiki torches came out. That was scary.
We don't have to
That was scary as heck, man.
Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for
right
country,
here under the trap door that we'll pull as
stand
soon as
for
we
our
win this.
democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos. And to end.
But not the chaos on the border. We need that chaos. And the chaos in Ukraine. We need that too.
Of our
Democrats need that to steal money from Ukraine.
Outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be
I wish that there was more Ukraine support on the right wing, honestly, because then Donald Trump could make that point of like, you know, you're too busy stealing Ukraine money to give them the money that they need, so you're actually destroying and killing Ukrainians by your own corruption. But
and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy, because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border. How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate, because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because it's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border, because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed, you'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll say, come on down to the office, let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you, because it really brings us this into focus. Truth in these times.
Trump knows that immigration is the most important part of American interest right now.
Repeatedly
so he brings it up whenever he can.
Many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
If you look at these,
acknowledging that you lost in 2020.
No, I don't acknowledge that at
No,
all.
he's like, no, I'm not going to do
that. You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislature.
Chicago native here agrees. Yeah, it was.
Million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm. Lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we
again, even by the official results, lost by a whisker is correct. It's like 0.4 percentages on some of the states.
And said there was no
so small. Like
that's the other thing.
That election at the end of the day really was won by
Can you
percentages.
Imagine a system where
easily
a person
cheatable
in an
percentages.
Election doesn't have standing? The President of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now
I'm glad he made
is
that
we
point.
have
The
a
election fraud
nation
was
in
old news
decline,
kind of almost
and
immediately
they have
after
put
it
it
happened.
into decline. We have a nation
The
that
action
is dying,
needed to be taken.
David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that.
Kind of a weak point, honestly. She could have really hammered that home, yes, but she chose a quip instead, the bad one.
We cannot afford to have a president of the United States
definite whiff on that one.
Attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump.
No, they're not. In fact, Zelensky and the Ukrainian government just presented their roadmap to victory, as they call it, to Trump. Bibi Netanyahu met with Trump and with his wife, Bibi and his wife, rather, with Trump. People are already acting like he could easily be the president. Orban, many other leaders.
In fact, lose that election. It leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected
there
men.
he is.
They call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary.
I'm not
They
really
said,
sure,
"Why is
honestly,
the
that
whole
Orban
world
is doing a
blowing
lot
up?"
of smart
3 years
things
ago
by
it wasn't.
detaching
Why is it
himself more and
blowing
more
up?
from the EU,
He said because
especially the
you
Russian
need
visa
Trump
program. I don't
back
think
as
Russians should be
president.
allowed to settle
They were
openly in
afraid
Hungary.
of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way.
Yeah,
he said
North
Russia
Korea
was
has
afraid
officially
of him.
allied with
I ended
Russia
the
now.
Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline.
Right,
in
that's
our
what should be
country.
remembered.
He ended
Biden
that, but he let the
reopened
Russians
a
build
pipeline for
going all
Russian
over
gas
Europe
and
heading
oil,
into Germany,
but
the
deleted,
biggest pipeline in the world. Look,
destroyed our
Viktor
own.
Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran,
That was beautiful.
she was the
Trump
first
just
one
said,
to
Donald
leave because she
Trump just
failed.
says,
And
Joe
now
Biden
she's
hates
running.
Kamala.
I don't understand it, but
Mr.
I'm okay
President,
with it
Mr.
because
President, your time is
I think
up.
we're
Thank
going to
you.
do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now
Yes.
to
Yeah,
the
we do.
Israel-Hamas
Dang.
war and the hostages who are still being
That
held,
was great.
Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December,
I got
you
nothing to
said,
add there.
quote,
That was
Israel has a right
fantastic.
to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate.
Yeah, the
How would you do
war
it?
in Gaza can't end so long as both sides
let's
want
understand how
something
we
that
got
the other
here.
one can't accept
On
at the beginning
October
of.
7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis, many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it
Unless
does
it's
so
across the
matters.
border, then we don't care.
Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state
That's kind of the main Democrat point is that, hey, we'll
Gaza,
support
where the
Israel against
Palestinians
Iran
have
and maybe
security,
Hezbollah defensively, but
self-determination,
we don't
and the
really like what you're
dignity
doing
they
in
so
Gaza.
rightly
That
deserve.
tends to be the Democrat
President
talking
Trump,
point at this
how
point.
would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about
I'm glad he mentioned
Israel, all of
Ukraine
a sudden,
like that, yeah.
she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's
Double tap,
president, I
nice.
believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that
Dang.
one. She
I got told
hates
by that by
Israel.
some communists
At the
at one
same
point.
time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different
good point there.
Spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading.
And one of the reasons that they're rich is because they sell so much to Russia. Yeah, people have to understand the Democrats are basically in bed with Russia, and we're probably going to play a clip from Vladimir Putin in support of Kamala Harris tomorrow on the show. So look out for that.
I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is
that's
well
not
known
what he
that
said.
He said when
that's not the relation
Ukraine,
he said that at all.
Was
but it was your buddy Obama who let Russia into Ukraine in the
exchanged
first place, so that's really ironic.
With Kim Jong-un, and it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be
No,
president
they're not, and again, we
because
will
they're
show
so
that.
clear. They can
Putin has
manipulate
ultimately
you
always,
with flattery
and at this point very
favors.
clearly said
And
that he
that
favors
is why
Harris.
So many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president.
The people
who is
you
not
fired
consistently
say you're a
weak
disgrace,
and
man.
wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their
Always
crime
tying
rates
it
are
back
way
to
down.
immigration. Always tying
Putin
it back.
endorsed her last week. Said, I hope she wins, and I think he meant it, because what he's
Even
gotten
Trump
away
Brent
with
mentioned
is
it. That's
absolutely
awesome.
Incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest
That's a big
pipeline
question.
anywhere in the world, going to Germany and all over Europe?
For anyone who thinks
Because
that
they're
Democrats
weak
are
and they're
pro-Ukraine,
ineffective.
ask
And Biden, by
that
the way,
question.
gets paid a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
All right, folks. So we kind of had to go off
And
live
now is a
for
free mobile app featuring your unfiltered view
sound
of
and other
what's happening
differences,
in
but now we can
Washington,
go straight
live
back.
and on demand.
Hopefully cut up
Keep
some of
with
this
the day's biggest
time
events
that we
with
have
live
here.
streams of floor proceedings
But yeah, I
and
think
from
that
US
it's
Congress,
going a lot
White
more
House
evenly
events,
than I
reports,
expected.
campaigns,
I think Kamala
and
is
more
holding
from the
her
world
own
of
pretty
politics,
well, simply
all
because
at
she
your
was
fingertips.
so
You can also
prepared
stay
to
current with the
just
latest
say all the
episodes
talking
of
points that she
Washington
had at the
Journal.
DNC.
Headline schedule
She has the
information for
DNC
C-SPAN
as her
TV
basis
networks
of what
and
she's
C-SPAN
saying.
radio, plus a variety of compelling
Trump is
podcasts.
able on the
C-SPAN
fly.
now
It's
is
very
available
clear
at
that
the
he's able to
Apple
do that,
Store
whereas
and
her
Google
only off the
Play.
fly is to
Scan
kind of
the
be
QR
like,
code to
oh,
download
don't
for
lie
free
now,
today.
or not
Or visit
true,
our
you know,
website,
just kind of
C-SPAN.org/C-SPAN
very
now.
hennish,
C-SPAN
very
now. Your front row seat to Washington. Anytime,
lightly armed,
anywhere.
I'll just say. So Trump is definitely the heavyweight here versus Kamala's lightweight.
We'll head back to Philadelphia
But that doesn't mean that
as
Kamala
Vice
is
President
completely
Harris
losing
and
this
former
debate.
President Trump meet face-to-face
People
for
have
the
to
first
understand
time.
that,
You're
that
watching
as long as she's
C-SPAN's
able to
live
present
coverage
that,
of the
like with the
ABC News
DNC, she's
presidential
able to
debate
project
simulcast.
a certain amount of energy and positivity. But Trump is out there just going at it very successfully, honestly. He's able to... I think that he's made a couple of mistakes, as you can't be perfect, but honestly, he's able to constantly bring those back and even make them into stronger punches than he had before. And that's a sign of a good leader.
into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are
winning
being
and losing are
people being
terms,
killed by the millions.
Terms,
it's the millions. So. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done.
It's true.
Than we are.
In fact, they're even undercutting them by not allowing them to give Ukraine permission to use certain weapons.
Don't have the courage to ask Europe, like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening.
Germany has even cut their aid, and that's partially the Biden's fault, not pushing hard enough.
They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin. Hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead.
So Biden let a mad orc just run rampant without any negotiation, without any problems, without any threats or saber rattling.
We don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here...
They threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected.
As Commander-in-Chief and as a diplomatic person, as a diplomatic entity, Trump has no reason to just say, oh yeah, 100% Ukraine. It's not responsible.
Remind the former president, you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me.
He's aware, but
I believe the
right
reason
now
that
he's
Donald
supposed
Trump
to still be in
says
charge
that this
of
war
everything,
would
and
be
he's not.
over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial
boundaries. Again, always with Kamala's point of, I was there and I did nothing. I should be there doing nothing again.
The importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself.
Personally,
Days
obviously,
later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and
what
others
did you do
we
there?
brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense.
The peace summit, 50 countries together that she's talking about, was almost set up entirely by Ukraine exclusively. So she's taking credit for that.
The Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands
all
as an
few
independent
dozen of
and
them.
free country.
And
if
no
Donald Trump were
F-16s.
president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And
amazing. His
means,
point is, Donald
because
Trump was
Putin's
president,
agenda
he would have never
is
invaded
not
in the
just
first
about
place.
Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, And that
because we don't complain at them anymore. Germany has cut their aid to Germany. Italy is starting to. This is all because Biden and Harris won't do anything to pressure them. It's really insulting what Kamala's relying on the ignorance of Americans on the Ukraine war, and that's really
starting with
awful.
Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator.
What does Trump gain from a friendship and a dictator who would eat you
Vice
for
President
lunch?
Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of
Kamala
you on
Harris
Ukraine
is the
tonight.
one who would be eaten for
Afghanistan
lunch
came
by
up in the
Putin.
last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and now, please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started.
It's true. That's the main point.
Emissary.
If she was there, then why did it allow it to be happening?
Zelensky and Putin. And she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fella. And that is another one.
This is a trap. Don't fall. She's going to fall for it.
When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America.
She was vice president for 2 years before the war. Before the war began. And she has not met Putin once. Is Trump's point.
That the alliances
and he just brought it out.
The world are dependent on our ability
I think she knows
to look
too,
out
which
for
is
our
why she didn't
friends
openly say
and
it.
not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring
they even
about
put it on the card. Has she ever met President Putin? No.
What is at stake here.
She has no experience with Putin at all.
Is commander-in-chief. And the American
Putin would eat her for lunch because she has no idea how to deal with a man like that. He's been exclusively dealing with people like Kamala his whole life.
Role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of
Trump's looking like, yeah, I won this point.
You talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European
a lot of people,
nations,
whether it's Mark Rutte or Stoltenberg, they all said how Trump was good on that.
One of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you. Otherwise, we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate.
He's been wanting to return to Afghanistan for like 3 minutes.
On Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result,
that was our problem.
America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day.
That is really not where you want to go. Oh, the 13 people died, but we're saving a lot of money. That's not where you want to go, Kamala.
Who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are.
That's
Donald
absurd.
Trump, when
We've
he was
lost
president,
people in Jordan. She just doesn't care about our losses.
One of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker.
Biden and Harris want to pretend that we've lost no American soldiers under their watch, and that's terrible.
He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban.
Who else do you negotiate with besides your enemies?
Taliban terrorists released. And get this. And the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us.
We also invited the PLO to Camp David for the Camp David Accords. We bring terrorists to Camp David all the time.
World leaders.
What is she talking about?
This former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States.
Which is to negotiate with our enemies so we can end wars, I guess.
And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we
must
like
Joe
do
Biden,
to
clap for that, you
the
stupid B-words.
And the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So, if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18
Amazing
months,
story.
We had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind.
It should be said, the U.S. has offered more equipment to the Taliban, I should say Biden and Harris did, than Ukraine for the first year of the Ukraine war.
They didn't do it.
It's ridiculous.
The agreement was
in terms of real equipment
by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal and, in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
It's true.
President Trump, thank you.
It's true.
I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you
gosh,
recently said of Vice
topic.
President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black.
Douglas, two-neck, again. This is Kamala Harris's race. She won't mention it.
It's appropriate
I don't know why.
on the racial identity of your opponent.
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm asking.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
Which is weird because she looks really white on the debate stage,
honestly. I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide.
Let me know in the comments, doesn't Kamala Harris look whiter since she's come on to the stage? Like, since she's been running for office? Just a little point.
This kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent.
She's kind of stumbling a little bit, but this is the point she's getting
property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5.
Interesting to say black and Latino, but they brought the guys on there, and they were all black guys.
This is
so
the same
interesting.
individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States.
So did Hillary Clinton. Doesn't
people
anyone remember that Hillary Clinton was the person who invented the Obamas from Kenya meme?
Want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor.
Ask the Puerto Ricans and black people in South Side of Chicago if they see each other and think friend.
Fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people.
Amazing. Democrat Party doesn't want to talk about race. Breaking headlines.
The language their grandmother speaks. We all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your third time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been
Joe
anything
Biden
like
was
it.
extremely racially
our
divisive,
country.
people.
And they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago.
Good point. It's old news.
Because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy.
Exactly. Attach the failures of Biden to Harris. That has to be a main point.
You can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up, Lindsay.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country.
But again, you're not new. You've been in charge this entire time. So either you've done nothing as vice president, so why would you do anything as president, or you were there and have failed. Again, 60-year-old lady demands new generation take power. Amazing. Again, I'm not Joe Biden. I'm just his vice president. No relation to the man. It's very silly.
Let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses.
Then why didn't you print it in a 900-page document, Kamala?
To pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000.
She sounds so childish. I think like Freedom Tunes has a great impression of her as just a childish person. Because the way I have a plan. I have a plan. It's not convincing at all.
What has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling.
You mean like you guys name-called and belittled Trump during the DNC the entire time?
President Trump.
Or when you called Donald Trump a sucker and a loser?
To defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she has a
have
plan
to move on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
That's what her plan is until just recently.
I just need to respond because the former president has said something twice that I need to respond to.
I'm sorry. We're going to move on, Vice President Harris. President Trump, this is now your third time running for president. You have
the debaters
long
rolled
vowed
over
to repeal
Harris.
and replace the Affordable
Or the
Care Act,
moderators.
also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Correct. Last month you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things,
I've heard Trump call it Obamacare far more than the Democrats have now.
I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up, they wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation.
Let it rot!
Politically, it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones, too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan.
So Donald Trump does not want to repeal Obamacare, yet he is an extremist on health care. Okay.
We come up with something. I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not-too-distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private healthcare options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act.
There goes Bernie over the edge, you know, under the bus.
Previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking, and then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So
can
stop
you imagine
with the
this
continuous
woman as a
lying about
gun
this
owner?
stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator.
You know, I really hate this point, honestly, because I remember this point being voted on. Like, this was an earlier talking point from the Democrats, that in 2010-ish, 2011-ish, they used to say, oh, yeah, it's funny. Well, this will relate to this.
You don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. So
again, John McCain was the main person that these people were denigrating, saying, oh, you voted against the Affordable Care Act 100 times or something, when it was actually voting on various parts of the Affordable Care Act about Obamacare. So it wasn't that they were trying to repeal it like 100 times. It was like maybe twice maximum, 3 times maximum. It was pieces of it, and very often it succeeded. So Democrats have been lying about this literally for almost a decade and a half now.
A child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes, and thankfully, as I've been vice president, and we, over the last 4 years, have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed, for the first time, Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to
you kill your
healthcare
babies and
should be a
live
right,
a bit longer,
and
maybe.
not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
In terms of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot of...
She made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years.
Yes, thank you.
But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to give. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
Donald Trump continues to hammer the point about Kamala being very liberal on this issue.
In particular, younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that
we get climate change, not housing relief or anything. We get climate change.
You call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can
the way
actually
she talks
deal
about
with this
issues
issue.
just makes me believe she knows nothing about the actual minutiae
and I am
and
proud that
feelings
as
of
Vice
them.
President over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been Vice President. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris,
during
thank you.
COVID.
It didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country
it makes a great
down
point.
the
Biden
tubes.
literally just steals and takes money from
Thank you.
everybody.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC
Interesting,
News
Kamala had
presidential
nothing to
debate
say about that
from
one.
Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
All right, so we're going to have closing statements after this and probably an end to the festivities. And I really hope there's another debate, to be honest. I really think America deserves another debate. There's just way too much that can be brought together, in my opinion, from the discussion between these two. Because basically, I think Kamala will want only one debate for this sole reason that she doesn't have anything beyond her DNC talking points in a second debate. It'll seem tired or at the very least scripted by then. So I think it'll be in her interest for herself to not have another debate. But we need one, because I do think that Kamala has kept herself pretty good, again, from her DNC talking points, from her setup. What's this?
To discover what the candidate...
Okay. It's really, again, Donald Trump has been going strong the entire time. Kamala has been tripping up. I don't think it's the sort of meltdown, really bad debate that people were expecting, honestly, more than anything. Honestly, I really do think that this is, it's not the Biden-Trump debate, where it was very, very, very obvious that Biden had something wrong with him and that his age was wearing him down and all these things. The vice presidential debate is also very important this year, because both the vice presidential debates have been, and the vice presidents in general, have been gaining in importance in as the elections have gone on since Obama. It becomes very important. Again, Joe Biden kind of a big part of that under Obama. So that's the only other time that we'll be able to see this really at all from Waltz and J.D. Vance as sort of surrogates for Trump and Kamala. But they're not perfect, and J.D. has a bit of an uphill battle with his, in my opinion, kind of generally bland social presentation. It's really important that the VP debate is done well for the Trump campaign, and I think it's very important that after this debate, the Trump campaign continues to bring new points against Kamala, because again, there's so many arguments that are being made against Joe Biden, and sort of use Kamala because again, Kamala being the surrogate of Joe Biden, she well deserves the credit for their failures, I guess you could say. She wants to pretend to be a fresh new character that hasn't been vice president this whole time. So talking about her career, her background, that would be preferable. Also, but a third debate should be the town hall format, because not having a town hall format for this debate between Kamala and Trump, it's very disappointing. We really do need a third debate, a town hall debate between Kamala and Trump. I think you need this more than anything else, because we're not going to see everything tonight. We haven't. They both sparred very, very well with each other. I think, again, Kamala has not really shown being particularly... she's been touchy, kind of meanish, but not horrifically mean-spirited like Joe Biden was. She's been answering questions fairly directly and only pivoting when it's beneficial for her. Trump has been able to throw back every question into... almost every question that he can into immigration, into Joe Biden's corruption, into the failures of Kamala Harris. So again, Donald Trump is doing a fantastic job, but he needs his opponent to do a bad job for this to be a complete victory, if there's not a third debate. So, we'll have to see. By the way, everybody, tune in for the show tomorrow. We'll have a great show tomorrow honoring 9/11, honoring America, talking about the debate, talking about recent comments about foreign leaders' views of Kamala Harris. All that and more, 6 p.m., right here on all the formats, Rumble, YouTube, and check out our Facebook posts. We are going to have a lot of new stuff for Hispanic Heritage Month, which is very much coming up very soon. Mexican Independence Day, all of this, and we might also have some upcoming events, so check that out.
Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe
not one step
that
back,
the American
comrade.
people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people.
Well, she neither understands the ambitions or the interests of the American people and has no plans. So, oh well.
Small businesses,
better luck next time,
new
Buttercup.
Families, and what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you,
Democrat
I started my career
libertarians.
as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked
And then keeping a tradition. I enslaved black people to the state of California by keeping them beyond their sentences. For you, America.
And that's the kind of president we need right now.
And that's the kind of president we need right now.
Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans.
Which is why no one voted for me.
On what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years
Which I wish Trump
build
harped
back up
on a
our
little
country
more,
by
but-
investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
Kind of shaky, but
so she just started by
fine.
saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it.
That would help her for the election.
Because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack, we're not going to take fossil fuel, we're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany
strong
tried
whether
that,
you like it or
and
not.
within 1 year they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate
Trump,
from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center.
Bringing down the
I'm
House at
Lindsay
the
Davis.
end.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
There it is. So that's the end of the debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Kamala Harris's closing statements, again, very much so scripted, very much on point. Trump completely on the attack, completely demolishing her point to where, at the stage where she couldn't respond to give the main points to the American people. Somebody getting swamped by the press here. We might see who it is. But this is, looks like Josh Shapiro, it looks like. The guy who really, really wished he was vice president. And a lot of Democrats do too. So, but that was it. That really says it all. Donald Trump, the strong attack versus the sort of static defense of Kamala Harris. It's not a complete finish. That is my biggest problem with this whole debate. It wasn't a complete finish. Donald Trump didn't sort of strike down his opponent like with Joe Biden, literally forcing him out of the race. And Kamala really didn't make herself look like the boss girl to Trump. She was very weak, honestly, towards Trump. Trump was a lot more, again, attacking, much more on point, much more all of these kind of things. So I think definitely you're going to see the Democrats doing victory laps over a relatively okay debate performance, especially compared to Joe Biden. They're going to pump up Tim Walz when he debates J.D. Vance, and they're going to try to prevent a third debate. So we need to push for a third debate. We need that very much so. We need a president who's actually going to approve of Ukraine attacking into Russia, a president who's going to fight China with tariffs, who's going to keep India from joining that bloc, keep the Americas in our sphere of influence. Like he said, Kamala Harris is not going to do any of those things because she's had the ability to, and she hasn't thus far. She's not interested in it. It doesn't win her this election. That's all she's interested in. And somebody, like I've said before, who has a pathological need for power, they're not interested in anything beyond when they get elected. That's always one of the things you have to worry about with any elected official. So we'll be talking more about this on the show tomorrow, our debate ideas, what we thought about it. Leave us a like and subscribe. Show us a comment of what you thought about the debate. And thank you all for joining us. We'll see you on the show tomorrow. We'll talk more about the debate. And until next time, adios. God bless America. Take care, everyone.